two things that happened that taught me about publishing in the music business. I was at a party in Downey, and there was a album by some organ player, and sometimes I can remember his name and sometimes I can't. And it had Stormy Monday on it, T-Bone's song. And they were playing this album, and I said, that's my friend T-Bone's song. And the guy looked at the album, and it didn't say T-Bone's name on it anywhere. And Lee Michaels was the organ player. And I said, well, that's T-Bone's song. And they were, oh, you're a blues guy, you blues boy. And, you know, I would get a blues boy from one side, I'd get another thing from the other side.
Yeah.
I asked this friend of ours who had that album, could I borrow that album? And I was playing with T-Bone Walker at the Parisian Room. And I went down to the Parisian Room, and I had an International Harvester Jeep. I remember T-Bone pulled up to the Parisian Room, and I was sitting in the car, and I said, hey, T-Bone, and I had this album, and I showed him the record. I said, hey, this has got Stormy Monday on it, and it doesn't have your name associated with it. T-Bone took the album from me, looked on the back, saw Stormy Monday, saw his name wasn't under it, took out the record, looked on the label, saw his name wasn't under it, shoved the label back in, slapped the record, and said, that's King's money. I can get that money. And he got $24,000 for it.
Wow. King's
money, royalties. Mm-hmm. That's where that comes from. King's money for publishing, 700-year Euro jurisprudence. That's why Rock and Ronnie was so interested in publishing money, because they gotta pay the publishing money, they gotta pay the mechanicals, because Congress determined it. Because the courts said, no, there's no reason they gotta pay you guys. Publishing, that's not publishing. You can go into that story some other time.
Wow, yeah,
that was in the 20s, and then ASCAP started, and then BMI, and all of that stuff. At any rate, about a year later, Joe Turner wanted us to back him up on this record. Bring the cat that plays like Pete Johnson, Gene Taylor.
Right.
And Johnny Baz, Gene Taylor, Doug Allgood, and I went over to Joe's house, where I'd been many times, and they saw Joe eat breakfast, and boy, could Joe eat breakfast, man. I swear to God, he had a whole loaf of bread for toast, and he had grits, and it was just a huge breakfast. I'd seen him eat it before, and just ate this huge breakfast. And he says, they got some cats, there's a Pablo record, that they got some cats over at the studio, but we're gonna rush them, and we're gonna take over the studio and record. So we get over there, and it's Milt Jackson and guys from the Modern Jazz Quartet, and we're going, Joe, no, and Joe's going, oh boy, let my boys. So we didn't play, but we stayed in the studio and watched them record it. And the so-called producer comes over to the engineer, some guy that's got some skills, and then the so-called producer, not making the so-called, hey, Picasso, turn up that red, you know, get out of here. The producer says to the engineer, while I'm sitting on this tall bench and I'm listening to him, and he says, do you know that Joe Turner doesn't want any of the royalties for performance? He just wants a flat fee. And the guy turns to him and says, that's crazy. So I'm driving Joe Turner home. And I said, hey, Joe, listen, this producer said to the engineer that you don't want any royalties, performance royalties and Joe says, you can't get that money, and he was right. See, the King didn't perform songs, he owned them. Performance royalties are still the illegal part of a record contract, and we won't go into that. That's when I learned that these publishing royalties were King's money, and you can get that money. And performance royalties, you can't get that money, and you can't get that money. And you don't to this day get that money. You don't get it. I don't care what they say. Come talk to me.
Yeah.
All right. That's when I learned about that.